The first wound wasn't her words. It was the silence that followed, a heavy, disrespectful quiet only your own child can create. I sat on the sun-washed patio of my daughter's Atlanta home, the house I helped her buy, built on years of sacrifices she never witnessed. Brianna Carter stood there with a smile that didn't touch her eyes, the same sly expression she used to wear as a teenager when she was preparing to do something she knew would hurt me. She lifted her glass of sweet tea, condensation sliding down the sides, and said loud enough for her friends to hear, "Don't mind my mom, y'all. She's just a retired bum. She doesn't really get how the real world works anymore." Her laugh was sharp and brittle, and Maya and Devin followed her lead with those polite little chuckles people make when they want to stay in the good graces of someone with status. They glanced at me sitting in the patio chair I had assembled myself, their eyes filled with shallow pity, but the worst part was the pride on my daughter's face. She wasn't embarrassed by what she said. She was proud of herself. The Georgia heat pressed against my skin, but a coldness settled in my chest. The manicured lawn stretched out in front of us, so green it looked artificial. Maya's designer bag sat on the table like a status symbol. Devin pretended to scroll on his phone, only glancing up when Brianna made a joke. And there she was, my child, acting as if I were some outdated decoration she forgot to put away before company arrived. I retired 5 years ago, not because I was tired or outdated, but because I had earned rest after building a business from pure grit, cheap coffee, and dreams I refused to let go of. I wanted Brianna to have everything I never had. Friends like these, a house like this, a future without fear. I even named the company after her middle name, Carter Dynamics, but never told her. I wanted her to build her own confidence without knowing I had placed the foundation beneath her feet. And still, here she stood calling me irrelevant. Being misunderstood is one thing. Being erased is something entirely different. I listened quietly as they talked about their work at Carter Dynamics, complaining about the board and making fun of older executives they assumed were out of touch. They had no idea the engine they were bragging about running was designed by the woman sitting silently beside them. Brianna sensed my silence and turned toward me, wearing a condescending smile. "I'm sorry, Mama," she said softly, though her tone held nothing gentle. "We're just talking about work stuff. I know it's probably real boring for you." Her friends stared at me like I was a relic they didn't know how to categorize. Then she leaned closer and added, "Honestly, it's probably for the best you stay out of it. You wouldn't last a day at Carter Dynamics. You just don't have what it takes anymore." Her words pierced me more deeply than I expected. I remembered her laughter as a 6-year-old on our old swing set, bright and carefree as she yelled, "Higher, Mama. Higher." That sounded fueled me for years as I built a life for her. Now it had been replaced by something hollow and calculated. A cold silence settled between us. I heard the clink of ice in Maya's glass, the soft breeze rustling the roses I planted for Brianna, and Devin tapping his phone again. They had already moved on, leaving me in the wake of her casual cruelty. Then she snapped her fingers like she suddenly remembered something. "Oh, Mama, can you run up to my office and grab my blue portfolio? It's on the desk. I need to show Maya the Q3 numbers." She didn't ask, she assigned the task as if I were her assistant. I rose slowly, feeling my joints ache under the weight of something heavier than age. I didn't look at her friends because I already knew what I'd see. And as I walked back into the house, my money's house, the secret I had kept for decades pressed hard against my chest, I had given my daughter the world. And in return, she had given me shame. I walked through Brianna's house with a heaviness sitting on my chest, feeling every step like a reminder of how much I had given her. The quiet interior smelled of expensive candles and polished wood, the kind of life I had worked day and night to provide. I had retired 5 years ago, not because I was worn out or irrelevant, But because I had earned a rest after decades of grinding, building, pushing, and sacrificing, I had spent nights in a cramped kitchen, spreading papers over the table while Brianna slept, dreaming of a life where she would never have to struggle the way I did. I had built Carter Dynamics from scratch long hours. Secondhand laptops, cheap coffee, and determination so fierce it kept me awake when my body wanted to collapse. I had done it for her. Every late night, every risk, every setback I fought through was for the little girl who once clung to my leg, trusting me with her whole world. I wanted her to grow up confident, protected, and able to walk into any room without fear. But somewhere along the journey, she mistook privilege for superiority. She mistook comfort for accomplishment. She took the world I built and convinced herself she built it alone. She and her friends continued talking outside, their voices drifting faintly through the windows as I walked up the stairs. They complained about the board of directors, about old folks stuck in outdated ways, and bragged about how they were the future of the company. They talked about Carter Dynamics like it was some machine they had mastered, never once considering the mind that designed its blueprint. They had no idea the founder was walking through that house, listening to every careless insult as if the blade were twisting deeper each time. I reached her office and saw the blue portfolio on her desk, stamped with a silver Carter Dynamics logo, the logo I had imagined before Brianna ever learned how to spell her own name. I picked it up and ran my fingers across the embossed lettering, remembering the early days when I could barely afford ink for the printer. When I held on to faith and grit as if they were currency, her disrespect felt heavier than the binder in my hands. It was the kind of weight only a parent knows, the ache of realizing you may have succeeded too well in shielding your child from struggle. I had wanted Brianna to feel powerful. I hadn't expected her to use that power against the very people who raised her. When I walked back downstairs and stepped out onto the patio again, the laughter had resumed as if nothing had happened. Brianna didn't even look up when I handed her the portfolio. She took it like I was an employee doing my job, her fingers brushing mine with no warmth, no gratitude, no acknowledgement. She buried herself back into her laptop while Maya and Devin leaned in. Eyes glued to the pages she flipped through, I stood there for a moment, unseen and unacknowledged, feeling like a ghost in a house built from my blood. The world around me moved normally, but I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. It was the kind of shift that tells you something bigger is coming, something irreversible. And then the side gate clicked open. A silhouette stepped into the backyard, tall and steady, with a face swept in confusion that sharpened into something else the moment he saw the scene in front of him. My son, Marcus Carter, walked toward us with a quiet intensity that had always set him apart. He saw everything in a single glance. His sister with her smug confidence, her friends perched around her like an audience, and me standing alone beside them, holding nothing but the weight of disappointment. He didn't say a word. He just walked over to me, his eyes locked on mine, and gently took the empty space where the portfolio had been in my hands, placing it on the table with a firmness that cut through the air. There was a metallic taste in my mouth, the taste of betrayal that no parent ever fully prepares for. He didn't need to ask what happened. He saw the posture of disrespect clearly. For a split second, Brianna and her friends stopped talking, their corporate bubble pierced by someone who wasn't impressed by their titles or their polished arrogance. Marcus had always been the quiet one, the observer, the steady hand, the child who watched the world closely and spoke only when there was truth to tell. He wasn't part of the company. He didn't want the corporate world. He worked with his hands, a skilled craftsman who found purpose in building things from raw materials instead of boardroom politics. He saw people clearly in a way his sister never learned to, but he also loved me fiercely. with a loyalty that came from understanding sacrifice rather than benefiting from it. And he had come to tell me something he knew would change everything. When Marcus arrived, the shift in the backyard was immediate. Brianna's friends straightened. Her smile faltered. She sensed that his presence carried something she wasn't prepared for. But instead of addressing it, she leaned back in her chair and tried to reclaim the moment as if nothing had changed. So, we were saying, she continued, forcing a lightness into her tone. The board is acting real old school lately. They don't get how fast we're moving. Maya and Devin nodded vigorously, eager to fall back into their rhythm. I stood there beside them, still invisible, but Marcus's eyes never left me. He didn't need to hear the words. He had seen enough to understand the dynamic. He moved quietly, like a man stepping into a room filled with broken glass, careful not to disturb the pieces until he understood how they shattered. Brianna seemed to realize my silence wasn't admiration or agreement. It was something else, something she didn't want to face. And instead of sensitivity or awareness, she chose the one tool she knew best, dismissiveness. She turned to me with a bright, sugary smile that held no warmth. "Mama, can you run upstairs and grab my blue portfolio?" I forgot to show Maya the Q3 projections. She said it in the same voice she used with interns at her office, polished politeness on the surface. Command underneath. She didn't request. She delegated. I felt Marcus stiffen beside me, but he didn't speak. He waited. He watched. My silence told him everything he needed to know. My knees ached as I turned to walk back into the house. But the ache wasn't from age. It was from the weight of the role she had forced on me. Assistant, errand runner, background noise. I moved through the foyer of the house, her house, but also the house my money had bought, feeling like a stranger in a home that was supposed to symbolize a mother's gift to her child. The upstairs hallway was cool and quiet. Brianna's office door stood open, the room perfectly curated with minimalist decor. Soft grays, neatly arranged furniture, and a faint smell of leather and expensive air fresheners. The blue portfolio sat on the desk exactly where she said it would be, stamped with the silver Carter Dynamics logo, the same logo I had envisioned decades ago when the company was nothing more than a dream in a garage. I picked up the portfolio. It felt heavier than it should have, as though it carried every disrespectful word she had flung at me that afternoon. The embossed letters pressed against my fingers like a reminder of the legacy I had built while she was too young to understand the meaning of sacrifice. When I returned to the patio, the conversation flowed without a single acknowledgement of my absence. I held the portfolio out to Brianna. She reached for it without looking up, flipping it open before her fingers even fully gripped the cover. She didn't bother to say thank you. Her friends leaned in beside her to look at the numbers, completely unaware or unconcerned about the humiliation that still hung in the air. I stood there for a moment too long, unsure whether to stay or move. I felt like a forgotten accessory in the scene, present but unnecessary. That's when the sharp click of the side gate opening cut through the chatter. Marcus stepped forward, his gaze moving from Brianna to the portfolio in her hands, then back to me. Without asking, he reached out and removed the portfolio from her grip, placing it firmly on the table. The gesture was small, but the meaning was immense. Maya and Devin exchanged uneasy glances. Brianna blinked, caught off guard by the interruption she couldn't control. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Mom, what's going on out here?" He didn't mean the meeting. He didn't mean the portfolio. He meant her tone. Her behavior. Her audacity. And Brianna knew it. She sat back and crossed her arms, wearing that defensive composure she used whenever she felt cornered. But this time, her usual confidence didn't land. Not with Marcus standing there. Not with her cruelty still hanging in the air. The balance had shifted, even if she didn't realize it yet, because Marcus hadn't just arrived at the house, he had arrived at the truth, and he was about to reveal something that would change everything. Marcus stood there, steady and silent, his presence cutting through the artificial confidence in the backyard like a blade. Brianna shifted in her chair, her posture straightening as if she could regain control just by sitting up taller. But the look in her brother's eyes made it clear this wasn't a moment she could charm her way out of. He didn't yell, didn't scold, didn't accuse. Marcus had never needed volume to command a room. His strength came from stillness, from the way he could see through a person with one look. And right now, his eyes were on me with concern and on his sister with a disappointment, so deep it made the air feel tight. Brianna forced a smile that didn't hide her irritation. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sugar-coated but stiff. "I thought you were at the workshop today." He didn't even glance at her. "I came to check on Mom." His voice remained calm, but the underlying message landed like a hammer. "You know, something you might want to try sometime." Maya and Devin froze, their eyes darting between the siblings. They had signed up for corporate gossip and drinks, not a family reckoning. Annoyed, Brianna stood up and marched toward me with her carefully practiced expression of concern, placing her manicured hand on my arm as if she suddenly cared about how I felt. Her touch was cold, almost performative. "Mom, don't let Marcus start anything. He's always looking for drama." We were having a perfectly pleasant afternoon until he showed up. Marcus' jaw flexed, but he didn't take the bait. He took a step closer to me, placing himself partly between us, a subtle shield. Then he lowered his voice, speaking directly to me, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mom, I need to tell you something." His tone carried a weight I instantly recognized, the kind that meant the truth was about to hurt. Brianna rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go?" Marcus ignored her. "I was on the phone with Dad's lawyer an hour ago." The air shifted instantly. My breath caught, and Brianna's smile froze on her face. "He said you." He turned his head sharply toward his sister, called him last week, asking about Mom's shares in Carter Dynamics. Brianna's face tightened. Marcus, don't twist things. And you," he continued, cutting through her defense effortlessly, "told him Mom was thinking of selling them to you? That it was her idea." The backyard went silent. "That's not what happened," Brianna snapped, her voice cracking slightly. "He misunderstood. Or you misunderstood. Somebody misunderstood." But Marcus wasn't finished. He said you pushed him, pressed him, asked him to speed up the process. He looked straight at her, eyes unblinking. "You said Mom agreed to transfer the shares before she changed her mind." Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Devin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and Brianna's expression flickered between outrage and panic as she realized the walls around her were beginning to collapse. She tried to salvage what she could. "Marcus, that's not what you think. I was just doing research, just trying to understand the paperwork. You always assume the worst of me." He stepped closer, voice lower, sharper. "I assume the truth. And the truth is you're trying to get control of something you didn't build." Brianna's eyes filled with anger, but beneath it, something else, fear. I watched my two children standing across from each other, thinking about how they were raised under the same roof, fed the same love, given the same chances. Yet here they were, one who protected family with everything he had, and one who weaponized ambition against the very people who loved her. Brianna's voice finally broke through the tension. "Mom, he's twisting everything. Don't listen to him. You know how he gets. He's always jealous, always trying to make me look bad." But the more she talked, the more transparent she became. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't need to. His silence was the verdict. He turned back to me and spoke with a calmness that cut through every lie she tried to hide behind. "Mom, she's making calls. Strange ones. About the company's founding charter." Brianna stiffened. She hadn't expected that part to come out. Her face paled under the heat of the afternoon sun. But she kept pushing, desperate to claw back control. Marcus, stop it. You're causing unnecessary drama. You're always trying to make Mom doubt me. His response was simple. I'm trying to make sure she sees the truth. For the first time all day, Brianna was the one who looked small. Her mask cracked. Not fully, but enough. And in that moment, I understood something I'd been refusing to face. My daughter wasn't just acting out of arrogance. She was acting out of intent. Purpose. Strategy. She wasn't mocking me by accident. She was preparing to erase me. And Marcus, my quiet, observant son, was the only one brave enough to say it out. Loud. Everything inside me shifted. The ache. The heartbreak. The confusion. They all began to harden into something else. Resolve. The truth was out. The tone had been set, and the battle lines were drawn. The tension in the backyard had shifted into something sharp enough to cut through the humid Atlanta air. Marcus stood on one side of the patio, solid and unmovable, while Brianna faced him with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, trying to hold her confidence together like it was slipping through her fingers. Her friends, Maya and Devin, sat frozen, afraid to move or speak. For years, I had watched my children interact, one steady as a heartbeat, the other blazing like a fire that demanded oxygen from every space she entered. But this was the first time I saw Brianna truly rattled, because Marcus wasn't attacking her with anger. He was dismantling her with truth. Mom, don't let him turn this into something it's not, Brianna said, stepping closer to me and placing her hand on my arm again. Her voice held that sugary sweetness she used when she wanted to manipulate the energy in the room. You know how Marcus gets? He blows things out of proportion. He always has. Marcus didn't react. He didn't raise his voice or defend himself. That was what made him so dangerous in her eyes. He spoke with a calm that couldn't be dismissed. And the truth he carried didn't need embellishment. He addressed her directly for the first time. Why did you lie to Dad's lawyer? Brianna's mouth opened and closed before she could form a coherent answer. I didn't lie. He misunderstood what I was asking. You told him Mom agreed to transfer her shares to you, Marcus replied evenly. That's not a misunderstanding. That's manipulation. She inhaled sharply, her eyes narrowing. You weren't on that phone call? No, he said, but I was on the one today. And he sounded uncomfortable. That tells me everything. She flinched, the way someone does when they're caught off balance. But she wasn't ready to lose the upper hand. She stepped directly between us, blocking Marcus from my view as if she could physically separate me from the truth he was delivering. Mom, she said, voice softening, almost pleading, you know how important Carter Dynamics is to me. You know how hard I've worked. Marcus doesn't understand what's at stake. He never has. She shot her brother a glare. He left all the business stuff behind years ago. He doesn't get what it takes to thrive at my level. My level. That phrase cut through the air with a bitter edge. Marcus finally stepped around her, positioning himself deliberately at my side. This isn't about levels. This is about respect. Mom built something, and you're trying to take it before she even knows you're reaching for it. Brianna let out a shaky laugh. Respect. Coming from you. You haven't set foot in a boardroom in 10 years. I don't need a boardroom to understand right and wrong, he replied. Maya and Devin exchanged a look uncomfortable, unsure, realizing this wasn't a harmless sibling argument. This was a fracture ripping open in real time. Brianna threw up her hands. You two always gang up on me. You think I'm the villain in every story. I just wanted to be prepared. I asked about the shares because I thought Mom might want to retire fully. I thought maybe she'd want me to take over. She emphasized each word like she was building a case for her innocence, but her argument had cracks. Marcus saw them. I saw them. And she saw us seeing them. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you were just asking, you wouldn't have told him this was already Mom's idea. You wouldn't have tried to get ahead of her. And you definitely wouldn't have kept it a secret from her. Her composure faltered. Her eyes darted toward her friends, searching for support, validation, anything to steady her. Maya looked away. Devin shifted uncomfortably, choosing silence over loyalty. Brianna's jaw tightened. Fine, maybe I pushed. Maybe I asked too many questions. But what's wrong with wanting a clear future? What's wrong with making sure I secure my position in the company I'm practically running? The problem, Marcus said, is wanting to secure a future by cutting Mom out of her own legacy. She swallowed. Something flickering in her eyes, defensiveness mixed with something dangerously close to guilt. But she wouldn't let guilt win. Instead, she tried one last route, diminishing me. She placed a hand on my shoulder again, this time firmer, claiming territory. Marcus, stop trying to confuse her. You know how easily she gets overwhelmed these days. She doesn't need all this stress. It was a coat of sweet venom words, coated in concern, but designed to undermine me, to cast me as fragile, confused, incapable. Something inside me snapped, not with anger, not even with sadness, with clarity. I stepped out from beneath her hand. The gesture so small but so powerful that even her friends straightened in their seats. That's enough. I said. My voice wasn't raised, but it carried more authority than any boardroom speech I had ever given. It was the voice that once negotiated million-dollar deals, the voice that could silence a crowded room with a single command. For a moment, even Brianna seemed stunned. Marcus looked at me with pride. Brianna looked at me with disbelief, as if she had forgotten who I truly was until that moment. She opened her mouth to speak, but there was no confidence behind it this time. Mom, what are you doing? I didn't answer her question because this wasn't about what I was doing. This was about what she had already done. It was finally time for me to stop pretending I couldn't see it. The moment I stepped out of Brianna's grasp, the entire backyard shifted. For the first time that afternoon, I felt completely awake. The haze of hurt, humiliation, and disbelief began to clear, leaving behind a sharp, steady resolve. I looked past both of my children and toward the French doors leading back into the house built from my labor, my sacrifices, my vision. I turned and walked inside without waiting for anyone to call after me. My footsteps echoed through the foyer, each one striking the polished floor with a certainty I hadn't felt in years. The elegant decor Brianna had chosen felt cold and impersonal now. A curated museum that held none of the warmth or history of the woman who paid for every brick. But I wasn't walking through the house to admire it. I was walking toward the truth I had locked away for decades, upstairs. The guest room sat unchanged, a space Brianna decorated with clean lines and muted colors, devoid of personality. She liked rooms that didn't reveal stories, rooms that didn't carry memories, rooms that stayed quiet. In the corner sat the roll-top desk my late husband, Richard, had built for me by hand. Smooth oak, warm to the touch, with tiny imperfections in the wood that told the story of his work. It was the type of craftsmanship that never tried to compete with the world's flash. It simply existed, steady and beautiful. I opened the bottom drawer with a small metal key I'd kept hidden in my jewelry box for years. The drawer slid open with a soft click. Inside sat a steel lockbox, cold and heavy, wrapped in layers of quiet history. I lifted it into my hands, feeling the weight of my past settle into my palms. This box held the original incorporation documents for Carter Dynamics, the founding charter, the first investor agreement I negotiated on my own, and something even more important, the sealed envelope Richard's lawyer handed me after his passing, just in case. He had said Dot just in case she forgets who her mother is Dot at the time. I pushed the envelope into the box without reading it. I had believed in Brianna's heart. I had believed in the girl who once ran barefoot in her backyard, begging to be pushed higher on the swing, her laughter lighting the sky. I thought she would grow into a woman who respected where she came from. Never imagined I would be standing here decades later. Opening a box meant for a crisis I never thought would arrive. The room was quiet, but my thoughts were loud. I imagined Richard standing beside me, his strong hands still stained with engine grease, his voice steady as he reminded me that love without boundaries can turn into harm. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid of the steel box. The documents lay inside, preserved perfectly despite the years. Crisp edges, fading ink, the unmistakable scent of aging paper. My name, Rose Carter, appeared on every line that mattered. Founder, owner, visionary. I had built the company brick by brick, signature by signature, sacrifice by sacrifice. Long before Brianna ever dreamed of running at Dot, I picked up the sealed envelope last. The paper felt aged and delicate, but the weight of it was anything but fragile. It held the founder's clause, an amendment Richard insisted on adding. A protection, a safeguard, a final promise. I had avoided this envelope for years because opening it meant acknowledging that the daughter I loved might one day betray me. But today, standing in that cold gray room, I knew avoiding it would cost me everything Dot in the backyard below. I could see them through the window. Brianna was pacing, animated and frantic, her phone pressed to her ear as she explained away my behavior to her friends. Marcus stood near the gate, his back to her, a quiet sentinel. Maya and Devin huddled together, whispering nervously. None of them realized that the ground beneath Brianna's world was about to split open. I closed the lockbox and held it tight against my chest. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel weak or confused. I felt like the woman who once built an empire from nothing. I walked out of the room, my footsteps steady, the weight of the box grounding me with every step. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't second-guessing everything was about to change, not because I wanted revenge, but because my daughter had forgotten. Something she should have never forgotten. I wrote the first chapter, and I was about to reclaim the rest when I stepped back onto the patio, carrying the metal lockbox against my chest. The entire backyard seemed to fall into a heavy silence. It wasn't the same dismissive quiet from earlier. It was sharp, expectant, the kind of silence that happens right before a storm breaks. Brianna's eyes flicked to the box with confusion and irritation. She didn't understand what she was looking at. She thought it was another one of my sentimental habits. She still believed she controlled the scene. She had no idea the landscape beneath. Her feet was about to collapse. I walked over to the stone patio table and set the box down. The sound it made solid, final cut through whatever fragile calm remained in the air. Marcus straightened. Maya and Devin exchanged a tense glance. Even the breeze seemed to stop moving. I opened the box without saying a word. When I placed the first set of papers on the table, Brianna frowned. "Mom, what is this? If you're having some sort of episode, maybe you should go inside and rest. We can handle this later." "There is no later," I said, my voice steady, controlled, unmistakably firm. "Sit down." The authority in my voice froze everyone. Even Brianna obeyed, lowering herself into her chair slowly, as if her body remembered the discipline of childhood, even if her ego didn't. I pulled out the original. Articles of incorporation, the crisp, slightly yellowed paper glowed in the afternoon light. At the top, bold and clear, sat a name she had spent her career praising, resenting, and trying to overshadow. I turned the document so she could read it. Founder and chairman, Rose Carter, my name. Not hidden, not abbreviated, not coded dot fully spelled out, loop in cursive. 30 years old and still carrying the weight of truth. What? Brianna's voice caught in her throat. What is this supposed to mean? That's not real. The founder was a man. RNC Innovations? Everybody knows that. RC stands for Rose Carter, I said evenly. I used my initials because I wanted you to build your own reputation, not live in my shadow. The moment the words left my mouth, something inside her cracked, her breath hitched. The color drained from her face. Maya's eyes widened, and Devin sat up straighter like someone had yanked him to attention. The revelation didn't just shake Brianna, it shook the entire foundation of the little empire she thought she was building. I didn't. Stop dot. I pulled out the second document, the sealed envelope. Containing the founder's clause, Richard insisted we add this, I said, laying it carefully on the table, is the amendment your father added to our will. It states that if any heir demonstrates gross personal or professional misconduct, full control of my majority shares returns to me immediately. The silence was suffocating. Brianna stared at the envelope as if it were poison. Even her friends didn't move. They were watching her entire career hang by a thread. Dot. She finally managed to whisper, "That's not fair." "It's protection," I corrected. "A protection your father believed we might need one day." "But Mom, I didn't do anything wrong." "I didn't. You tried to lie to a lawyer to get my shares," I said calmly. "You tried to erase me from my own company, from my own legacy." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus picked up the articles of incorporation from the table and read the founder's name one more time, his voice firm and filled with quiet pride. Rose Carter. His eyes lifted to meet hers. "You didn't just disrespect your mother. You disrespected the very person who gave you everything." Brianna's cheeks trembled. Her bravado slipped. Her arrogance drained. For the first time all day, I saw not the executive she pretended to be, but the frightened child who didn't understand the magnitude of her own choices. I looked at her friends. Their careers, their comfort, their future, it all hovered on the edge of the truth now revealed. The little jokes they made about the old founder, the dismissive comments about leadership, the arrogance, they played every memory back in their minds and realized they had been mocking the CEO's mother to her face. The silence was loud, thick, undeniable. Then I said the sentence that sealed everything. "Brianna, the company you think you run, the company you brag about owning a piece of, the company you insulted me in front of, I built it. I named it. I protected it. And I shielded you from that truth because I wanted you to grow with humility." Her lips trembled. "Mom, please." But the truth couldn't be undone. Her world had already cracked down the middle. The moment the truth settled over the patio, the silence became almost physical. Brianna stared at the documents as if they were burning holes through her future. Maya and Devin looked like they wanted to disappear into the furniture. But it was only the beginning. I slipped my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. Then I turned it around so everyone could see the message already sent to the CEO of Carter Dynamics. A single word .execute before Brianna could process what that meant. Her phone lit up in her hand and started ringing, the sound slicing through the tension like a siren. The caller ID glowed across the screen. David Chen, CEO. Carter Dynamics, her face strained. She froze. Her thumb hovered, unwilling to answer, unable to decline. The phone kept ringing, loud and unrelenting. Then Maya's phone started, then Devin's. 3 distinct tones, overlapping in a wave of dread. They all looked down at their screens, and terror rippled across their faces as they saw the names of their department heads and division directors calling. The chain of command had activated. My command. When the calls went to voicemail, the real storm hit. 3 phones buzzed at the same time, then again. Then again. Notification after notification flooded their screens, urgent emails marked high priority. They scrolled through them with trembling hands. I didn't have to see the subject lines. I had written them myself that morning. Save them under a contingency folder that only I and the CEO had access to. Subject: immediate termination of employment. Brianna read the email, her eyes moving frantically from line to line. Her breath came in short, shaky bursts. The proud executive persona she wore vanished. What remained was raw disbelief. She looked up at me, her voice breaking. "Mom, you fired me?" Her words cracked in the air like a child who had just realized punishment wasn't a warning, it was real. "You fired us?" Maya squeaked, gripping her handbag like it was a flotation device. I kept my voice steady. "I didn't just fire you, Brianna. I revoked your access, froze your corporate accounts, canceled your company cards. As of 1 minute ago, you are no longer an employee of Carter Dynamics." I turned my gaze toward Maya and Devin. "That goes for both of you as well. You have 5 minutes to gather your belongings and leave this property." Their mouths fell open. Maya grabbed her bag with shaking fingers. Devin stood so fast his chair scraped the concrete. From the side gate, a car door slammed. A man in a sharp black suit walked toward us with a leather briefcase in his hand. His expression was professional, expressionless, and final. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew he was walking into the center of a collapse. It was Arthur Vance, my personal attorney and the executor of Richard's will. He nodded respectfully at me before setting his briefcase on the table. "Beside the metal box, Rose," he said, opening a stack of papers with practiced movements. "Everything has been set in motion. The board has been notified. The founder's clause has been formally invoked." Brianna's eyes widened with panic. "Arthur, please, you know me. This can't, there must be a mistake." He didn't flinch. He didn't soften. He didn't entertain her denial. He faced her directly, his voice cool and unwavering. "Miss Carter, a courier is already en route to your office to collect all company property. An injunction has been filed preventing you from making contact with any Carter Dynamics employees, clients, or partners. As of today, you have been legally severed from the company." Before Brianna could respond, another figure appeared behind us. A security guard stepped through the house and positioned himself beside the French doors. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone made the message clear. Access denied. Authority revoked. Everything she thought she owned. Gone. Maya and Devin didn't wait for further instructions. They hurried out through the side gate, pale and shaking. Their loyalty dissolved the moment trouble arrived, leaving Brianna alone in the middle of the patio. Clutching her phone like it might bring her world back if she held it tightly enough, her kingdom had collapsed in real time. And she was standing in the ruins. The same daughter who once called me a retired bum was now facing the truth. She had mocked the queen who built the throne she stood on, and the fall was only beginning. The patio felt colder once Maya and Devin fled through the side gate, leaving Brianna alone with the truth pressing down on her like a weight she could no longer hold. She sank into the same patio chair where she had mocked me earlier, the same place she had laughed and bragged and dismissed me as a burden. Now she sat there hollow, staring at her phone, scrolling through the termination email again and again, as if rereading it could somehow change the words. Arthur continued laying out documents with calm precision, each paper and nail sealing the consequences she had earned. The sunlight caught the edges of the legal forms, making them gleam with the cold finality of a verdict. The security guard by the French doors never moved. He didn't have to. His presence alone was a reminder that the power she believed she held was gone. Access revoked. Authority removed. Identity stripped away. Marcus stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, steady and grounding. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. His eyes held sadness, disappointment, and a deep loyalty that Brianna had long forgotten how to show. Arthur closed his briefcase and addressed her again. Miss Carter, the legal orders have all been processed. The company has already transferred the necessary restrictions. Your accounts are frozen. Your building access is terminated. Your email has been disabled. Each sentence hit her like a blow. You have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings from this property, he continued. Security will remain on site until the residence is fully vacated. She finally looked up at me, eyes glassy and unfocused. You're kicking me out? Out of my own home? This is company property, Arthur clarified, his tone professional and firm. Owned by the primary shareholder. Now that your employment status has changed, you have no legal right to reside here. She turned to me instead of him, her voice cracking. Mama, please. You can't do this. You raised me here. She gestured around blindly as if the walls themselves might come to her defense. This is my life. No, I said quietly. This was the life I gave you. And you forgot what that meant. A tear slid down her cheek, only one, because her shock wouldn't let her cry yet. It wasn't remorse. It was loss. Raw, irreversible loss. Marcus stepped forward. Mom's giving you something you won't understand right now, he said gently. She's giving you a chance to learn who you are without power protecting you. Arthur opened another folder and laid out the final papers. The company will provide temporary housing for 6 months, he stated, and a severance package substantial enough to sustain you while you evaluate your next steps. Brianna's hands trembled. I don't need charity. I met her gaze evenly. It's not charity. It's the last thing I can give you as your mother before you decide who you want to become without. Carter dynamics shielding your flaws. Her face crumpled. For the first time all day, I saw the little girl she used to be, confused, scared, desperate to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. But the truth was simple. She hadn't lost everything today. She had given it away piece by piece long before this moment, when Arthur finished. He nodded at me respectfully. Mrs. Carter, the transition is complete. The security guard stepped farther into the yard, signaling the end of the conversation. I turned to leave, Marcus walking beside me. But at the gate, something made me stop and look back one last time. Brianna was sitting alone in the middle of a beautiful backyard, surrounded by every piece of a life she thought she had earned, now slipping through her fingers. Her phone rested uselessly in her lap. Her shoulders were trembling. Her confidence was gone. She had climbed so high on a ladder I built and handed to her, only to forget who held it steady. And now that I had let go, she finally understood the danger of thinking the world owed her something. Maybe, just maybe, losing everything was the only thing that could save her. Brianna sat alone in that patio chair, staring at the termination email on her phone like the words were written in a language she no longer understood. Everything about her posture, her silence, the way her shoulders sagged showed the truth she'd fought so hard to avoid. The empire she believed she controlled had never been hers. It had always been in my hands, and I had finally closed them. I knelt in front of her, the same way I did when she was a little girl with scraped knees and skinned palms. The contrast between those memories and the woman sitting in front of me now was almost too much to bear. I took her phone gently from her trembling hand and placed it on the table. For the first time all day, she looked at me with real vulnerability. Her eyes weren't angry, they were lost, desperate, searching for something familiar in the wreckage of her certainty. Why? She whispered, the word weak and raw. Why would you do this to me? I didn't do this to you, I said softly. You did this to yourself. She blinked, confusion clouding her expression. You became someone who mocked her own mother to impress strangers. I continued. Someone who lied to her own brother. Someone who treated family like stepping stones instead of anchors. My voice stayed calm, but each truth landed directly on the heart of who she had become. You turned ambition into a weapon, and you aimed it at the people who built your foundation. This isn't punishment. This is accountability. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. Her silence said more than any excuse could. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. Marcus moved beside me, ready without needing to be asked. Arthur cleared his throat politely. Security will remain until the property is vacated. She has 24 hours, he said, his tone still formal, businesslike. I nodded, but I didn't take my eyes off Brianna. She looked small in that chair, small in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. Her power was gone. Her certainty was gone. The world she crafted around herself had cracked open, and now she was finally forced to face the reality beneath it. The company will provide you with a temporary apartment for 6 months. I told her. And the severance package you're receiving will give you time to figure out who you want to be, when you don't have Carter dynamics to hide behind. Her eyes filled with tears, she tried to blink away. Only one escaped, sliding down her cheek and carving a clean line through her makeup. It wasn't a tear of remorse. Not yet. It was a tear of loss, the first sign that the facade she built was crumbling. Turned and walked toward the gate with Marcus at my side. His hand on my shoulder felt warm and grounding, a reminder that I wasn't walking away alone just before leaving. I looked back one last time. Brianna sat motionless in the center of her perfect backyard, the one she used to flaunt, the one she believed she controlled. Now it looked like an empty stage after the show had ended, the lights off, the audience gone. The performer left alone with her thoughts. She had inherited a kingdom and destroyed it in the same day, but for the first time. I saw possibility in her eyes, not certainty, not entitlement, but the fragile spark that comes when someone finally hits the ground and realizes they have to climb again. This time, not with arrogance, but with humility. I had spent years giving her everything, and by taking it all away, I was giving her the one thing she truly needed, the chance to rediscover her own humanity, because a legacy isn't meant to be exploited. It's meant to be honored when you forget who built the road that carries you. The ground will eventually collapse beneath your feet, as Marcus and I step through the gate, leaving her to face the consequences she created. I carried one final hope in my heart, not that she would forgive me, but that one day she would finally understand me.